Yeah, it's hard to believe that this is the 26th season of the Luncheon Society, which before the pandemic met in San Francisco, Los Angeles, West LA, that met in Boston and New York. And we're happily ensconced on Zoom. We're going to be here for the long term. It's going to be great. And for those, for those of you who haven't joined us in the past, it really is a fun place for conversation. It's, Jane Goodall dropped the F-bomb here. Christopher Hitchens led us on a drunken pub crawl through San Francisco and stood on the top of a table and read Shakespeare flawlessly. Buzz Aldrin told us he didn't see the moon landing on television because he was clearly out of town. And Paul Krugman asked Linda Ronstadt to not ask her a question, but to sing it. This is the kind of shit that goes on here. And it's a lot of fun. And like I told Erika, for many years, her dad would join us for the pre-Oscar luncheon, and I've never seen so much passion. I thought we'd have to call the cops or something like that. But as I said, Erika's joined us before when the book "You're Not the Boss of Me" came out. And again, the Luncheon Society is purposely all over the map. And here's what's coming up. Marvin Kalb with CBS, NBC, or the big news giants, talk about his time in the Soviet Union. Former Disney actress Haley Mills will come at some point in late September. That'll be a lot of fun. Our dear friend Laura Galloway, who's going to probably be on this call, except we'll see how the time zone works, has got a great book that's getting a lot of wonderful notices about her time, kind of moving to Norway and finding herself. And then we have a good friend of ours, John Callis, who used to run, well, he still runs, well, he ran JPL's mission control for 2 of the Martian rovers. And he's going to talk about what's going on, kind of a bookend to what we had prior to this. So we're excited that Erika has joined us. This is great. I mean, and we got to see Sam Spade up close and personal on 4 occasions, I recall. 3 of them were Luncheon Societies for his book, and one of them was for one of her dad's gatherings. And each of the times we had Luncheon Society gatherings, Erika had to reel him back in. And he would threaten to beat up people, all this crazy shit. And to her credit, she probably kept things from kind of spiraling completely out of control. And there was one story, and then I'll give it to Erika before she begins. One of the nicest people you ever meet is Linda Ronstadt. And she came to Luncheon Society for many, many years before she got ill with Parkinson's. She and Sam got into it. They got into what only could be called a Donnybrook of a screaming match, to the point where we were getting calls that afternoon for the next 48 hours from members of the press asking about, was this the case? Does this actually happen? Of course, I said no. But then again, I was brought up short by a number of my PR friends who said, "My God, McBarton, you blew a great opportunity for a great story." Either way, we all survived it. And so with that, thank you, Erika, for coming today. So here's what we do. It's pretty simple. Erika will do a reading from the book. And then after that, we just go to Q&A. And that's where the fun part begins. So without much ado, Darren, you're up.
Some ado, because I forgot about the part where I was going to read. Let's see. Good Lord. I'm sorry, people. I forgot that I was supposed to read for you. I thought we were just chatting.
Just open the book to it.
Have people just gotten the book? Are they in the middle of reading it, or
it's a combination of both. There are people who will be picking up the book. Some people have the book and are going through it. Others have read it completely. But one thing that we're going to do, though, is I'll be sending book plates to Erika for her signature. And if you already have the book, what we'll do, you will get the book plate. If you don't have the book, you'll get the book and the book plate. So everybody wins.
Okay, well, let's see. There's a chapter I'd like to read to you, a few pages. What is it, like a 10-minute read you're looking for?
It's a section. I remember we had Melanie read a little bit. We had Lorraine read a little bit. It's set up. I'll read the event.
So, since you're also interested in Sam Spade, let me just set up the book a tiny bit, because this book is not actually about Sam Spade. It's about 2 experiences that I had in my life that were sort of repetition experiences. The first was in high school. I was sent to a bohemian boarding school in 1978. I was sort of a difficult child. Gee, I wonder why. And I thrived in this school. It was a very rough go, and a lot of it is recounted in the book. And then 6 weeks before graduation, I was seduced by a teacher, and the school found out about it, and this teacher was fired, and I was asked to leave. They couldn't legally expel me because I was still their responsibility. Anyway, so I buried that in a mountain of shame and went on to live my life and tried to prove to the world that I was actually good, even though I had been marked as a dirty, fucked up girl very early in life. And I made a bunch of choices around that sort of desire to prove myself, and respectable marriage and motherhood was sort of the thrust of that. And what ensued was 20 years of me trying to show up and get an A+ in those categories, while simultaneously sort of compartmentalizing this pain that had come out of the circumstances, being sent to boarding school, kicked out, and then cruelly dumped by the teacher later that summer. So in 2009, I met our friend, Mr. Elroy, at a festival of books. I had met him twice before. And I recount this, I sort of began a sort of strange fantasy relationship with him. You know, I was sure that we were destined for each other. It was not his projection, it was mine. And we engaged an affair in 2009 that broke up my marriage and led to me doing luncheon societies with him. So it was a very, very tough go for 4 years, on and off for 4 years. So I will now read this little section. It starts on page 2009. That happens during the affair. Spade had a deluxe king-size mattress delivered to the fuck pad and handed me an envelope with $4,000 in cash and told me to go buy myself some sheets. When standing in the parking lot of Bed Bath & Beyond with a stack of 20s as thick as a slice of challah, one either falls into a shame spiral for being now officially a kept woman, or one can erase such troubling thoughts and pretend she is Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman, a damsel being rescued by her prince, a damsel who happens to like fine home furnishings. So somewhere, Hector Elizondo was cheering me on. I was not a gold digger, but I dug Spade's gold. It was both deliverance and damnation. I went overnight from keeping receipts in an envelope for later inspection by my parsimonious husband to being handed an envelope of cash like I was Tony Soprano's Guma. One note in the text, they changed it to Goomba over at Hachette. I have no idea why, and I apologize, but it's Guma. I felt like a hot, fucked up game show contestant. Behind curtain number 1, a complete set of new Egyptian long staple cotton towels. Behind curtain number 2, the complete loss of self-respect. Early on in our secret courtship, Spade had presented me with a pair of expensive cowboy boots. They were custom made, shiny, pointy, with gaudy yellow insets and orange stitching up the shaft. They were hideous, and I couldn't imagine the occasion where I'd want to wear them and blow both my fashion and romantic covers at once. But even though I hated the boots, I also wanted to keep them with a desire that gnawed at my guts. I hid them in the trailer and pulled them out to marvel at them when I was alone. They felt like hard evidence of another world I could hardly believe I was living in, a world in which I was no longer myself. I had to tell somebody, so I called my sister, the only person who knew about Spade. That's crazy. He shouldn't be giving you gifts. You're married. You're not his mink stole girl, she had said. I slid the boots out of their box and touched them, imagining with pleasure how much they would hurt my feet one day. The fact was, I wanted to be a mink stole girl. I liked how it felt to be someone's glittery prize. I kept the boots. Months later, when we were safely out in the open and I had officially assumed the role of Sam's arm candy, I dared to wear the gaudy kicks in public. I felt like Ann Richards. It was the boots' only outing. Money has always been complicated for me. I am an equal mix of my father's Protestant work ethic and my mother's magical financial thinking. Dad ground out a solid upper middle class living on his typewriter, and what wasn't spent on tuition and summer camp, my mother spent lavishly at Bloomingdale's and Bergdorf Goodman. It was my father's curse to be married to two impecunious women. His second wife, Carol, drowned her own big hurt in consumer goods, compulsively buying things she already owned. When she died, she left behind a closet full of silk pantsuits in a rainbow of Rubbermaid colors and drawers full of extension cords. As much as I judged my mother and stepmother, I too was a spendthrift. I have never been a status shopper. I don't even sport shop at outlet malls or go to Beverly Hills for anything other than doctor appointments. I have never longed to be rich in the car and mansion sense. My bourgeois dream had always been to live effortlessly off gigs, to make do with my good old Le Creuset pot and a single Henkel's chef knife and stay out of corporate cubicles. My game is the goodwill and big lots. But the compulsion is the same. I have often used thrift shopping as a distraction from life. I could easily have frittered my family's fortune away $20 at a time. Spade, on the other hand, had known actual hunger, had been raised on a hot plate diet and had gone to sleep in public parks and woken up in drunk tanks. He had educated himself in public libraries and written his first novel standing up at a dresser in an SRO hotel. Because he knew he could live without money, he gave it away freely. He maintained what he called a high roller mentality, driving expensive cars and keeping his pockets tufted with 20s that he would throw at waiters, estheticians, car park valets, and homeless people. Every night that he spent in a swank hotel was a personal victory lap for him. When our first Christmas came around and I puzzled over what to get a man who wanted only things I could never afford, I bought him a conductor's baton. I thought he might like to conduct Beethoven's Ninth in the privacy of his own home. He handed me a small square box. Inside of it was a Rolex. "Isn't it beautiful?" he asked, taking it off its velvet tuffet and shackling it to my wrist. It was thick and heavy and so shiny and so gold. In all my life, I had never had a moment's desire for a Rolex, and now I had a Rolex. The mink-stole girl prowled the aisles of Bed Bath & Beyond, choosing thick ivory sheets and a DKNY Matelassé bedspread in a pale teal. I bought king-size down pillows and a fluffy white throw to toss over my pretty little pedicured footsies. I shopped for bed and bath. As I shopped for bed and bath, what I felt was beyond anything I had ever known before: power, shame, anxiety, guilt, and a deep grind of sexual longing. There was something so primal in being kept. At 46, I could still be someone's sexual prize. Naturally, there were some explicit conditions that came with being Spade's mink-stole girl, rules to which I was expected to closely hew. We'll probably get into this later. No garish nail polish. The sight of dark, whorish colors on my fingernails or toenails sent him into a paroxysm of paranoia and triggered a full-on panic attack. We compromised. I could get manicures and pedicures, but my fingernails had to be clear polished and my toenails could be painted only in a pale, sparkly color, like a surfer girl color, he clarified. To veer from this polished palette was considered total betrayal. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit so we can go on, but he had all these there was no dope smoking, no modesty and dress was important, no spas. I could never be naked in front of anybody other than him, medically or for any reason. No R&B, no funk, no blues, no music of Black people, basically. Not even jazz, like it was insane. No dancing, all of this stuff. All of this, Spade's world, Spade's rules, Spade's jealous paranoia was as strange to me as standing in a checkout line at Bed Bath & Beyond with a mountain of dry goods, fingering a stack of 20s. As my mops, pans, and towels were scanned, I wondered where this would all end. We had yet to begin the sweetest months of our relationship, when we lived free and clear, swaddled in luxury and steeped in love. Yet I already knew that whatever good was coming, it couldn't possibly last. I looked over my domestic haul and thought of my mother in New York, to whom I had been tithing $400 a month to keep afloat. My sister, uncle, and father also chipped in the same amount, and thus the family kept Jill from eviction and starvation. She hadn't held a job in years. Her age and extracting standards for others combined with the economic downturn made her virtually unemployable. I thought constantly of her with her chipped saucers, pilling sheets, tar-stained kitchen cabinets, and threadbare furniture, waiting for the next deposit, just as I waited for my donations from the various men in my life. My father was paying my ex-husband a salary, part of which was being meted out to me per the terms of our divorce. Mammon filtered down through the strata of my family, extracted from the air by men at their desks, handed to women who spent it on high quality, non-durable goods. I peeled off $1,000, paid the cashier, and trundled my haul out to my car. When I got home, I hid the rest of the cash in the toe of one of the cowboy boots. I filled that boot with cash over the next 2 years, right up to the shaft, until Spade and I finally separated. I was saving against a future in which I would turn out exactly like my mother, sitting in my apartment with my cat and basic cable, beyond the ken or care of the children I had alienated with my own impulsive selfishness, unfuckable and alone. Every minstrel girl knows that her life is built on a lie, and that money, like love, never lasts.
Wow. So when we go to the Q&A, to make sure that we're not talking over each other, go to the chat and just drop your name in, and we'll just kind of keep it going that way. I'll start off. Yeah, the Elroy's environment is probably the most public thing, but I think that my take is that the Buxton experience may have been the most painful thing. Is that a good place to start?
Yeah. For sure.
If you can walk us through that a little bit so we can set that up so that those who haven't read the book really understand the context behind it, and really, because that's a story that just doesn't take place in 1979. It's a story that has a follow through to the present. So I'll let you go from there.
So originally, I was haunted by this high school story my whole life. And I always framed it as anecdote because I never confronted it. So in 2007, my first book, You're Not the Boss of Me, came out, and it was time to write another book. And I had always thought that I would tell this story of my expulsion from this boarding school. But I was a humor writer, and I wanted to write this as a funny book, as a humor book. And it was going to be all like kids running around like smoking dope in the woods and sneaking out of the dorm and pranking each other and all those good times, which there certainly were in my experience at the school. But I couldn't figure out how I would like rationalize the part where I got seduced by a teacher and kicked out at the end, but I figured I'd just figure it out, you know? So I got a writing fellowship to Hedgebrook, which is this wonderful writing place in Seattle, off the coast of Seattle for women. And I was given a 3 weeks alone in a cottage, you know, and you would see people at dinner. And I got to this cottage, and on the way out, and this is in the book, I was reading Joyce Maynard's autobiography, At Home in the World, which was about her affair with J.D. Salinger. And it had been recommended to me by a friend, thinking like that might help give me a little insight or perspective on how to write about an affair as a young student with a much older pedagogic man. So I started reading this book, and it was on the plane to Seattle where I read the chapter where her mother is dying. And her mother, it was very much like my mother in a lot of ways, super, super smart, kind of cold and removed, poor Joyce had alcoholism to deal with in her family, not in mine, but you know, very just the same lady, basically. And this mother, Friedel, calls Joyce at the end of the book, and all she can say as she's dying, her last words to her daughter were, love, 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 love. And it ripped me open. And I got to this writing fellowship, just something, I mean, it just was like the hook into me. And I didn't understand it, but it opened up all the grief that I'd been carrying around. And what I realized was that my mother had abandoned me, and that was the hurt. And that's why the hurt of the loss of this feckless teacher that seduced me that spring, that's why that loss was so unbelievably painful. And a lot of that is set up in the book, you know, sort of my background with my parents who, you know, my father was obviously film critic Richard Schickel, but also my mother was a novelist and a journalist and a frustrated writer in a lot of ways. And so it's sort of, I got set up for this life, but then sort of booted out very young at the age of just right at 14. And it's about me trying to get home, a lot of that Buxton stuff. So all of this happens, and I'm like, holy shit, I don't know how to write this book. This book, I'm incredibly sad and distraught, and this is much, I don't want to write a sad book. You know, who wants that book? I don't want that book. So I thought instead it would be much easier if I were to just write back to James Elroy on Facebook. You know, we had friended each other, and he started sending me these love poems. And I resisted him for a few months, you know, kept him at arm's length because I really did not want to blow up my marriage. I was very committed to that idea and the desire to be good. But it was like, it was so deep. I mean, our attraction for each other was a trauma bond. You know, the moment I met him, I recognized him because our problem was the same. We had both lost our beautiful redheaded mothers at a very young age. I mean, his to murder, and mine just to indifference and neglect. So that was the sole assignment between us, and that's what we were doing together. And it was so powerful that, and the other option of confronting my past and my sadness was just so painful that I just had the affair. And then as the affair, which some of you got to witness, and certain parts of it began to devolve, I started to see the pattern. And I started to realize that the story I was living was part of the older story I was trying to write, that it was connected. It was the same story, and it was very connected. So that's how that happened. That answers your question, I hope.
And there's also another piece of that. It's at that time, school officials, and this kind of went from the 50s, at least after the Second World War, to as late as the 90s, really turned a blind eye to these types of relationships and didn't really look into what was the long tail effect on the psyche of these women who went through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, in my school, there were several teacher-student relationships that I was observing that made me think that it was okay. I mean, some of us were there then, and we remember the 70s, and it was just a very different time. I mean, it was very, you know, there was nothing, you know, we had Woody Allen's Manhattan, and we had Taxi Driver, and we had this idea of children functioning as sexual adults was just accepted at that time. And then in any institution where parents were not around, where children were left at the mercy, be that a church, a boarding school, a Boy Scout troop, you know, there is predation, and there's a rich history of it. And then those teachers, priests, troop leaders, whatever, get kicked out and passed along. It's called passing the trash. It's an actual thing. And that's what happened with my teacher. He was simultaneously teaching at Bennington College, and the Buxton School never called Bennington to say what had happened. He went on to teach it for like another 25 years or something like that. So yeah, it was a very different time and very confusing.
Okay, so let's start the Q&A. Throw in your name. Who's up? We'll just start. Who's up next? Who's got the first question? Janet, do you want to take one? You know some of the answers.
I don't see any questions. Am I missing something?
No. I think we're all just kind of,
okay.
We're all just kind of saying,
Okay.
Vicky. Okay, Hillary, you're up, then Vicky. There we go.
Good.
Hi there. So, Erika, I loved reading it, and there's so many things. I think about Santa Fe, it broke my heart. And even just now when you were talking about, I forget you, Manhattan and Taxi Driver, and you being your mother protecting you by not letting you be and play Brooke Shields' part. Pretty Baby, right? Am I blanking?
Yep.
So one of the things I'm thinking about, and I know some of people in this chapter, though not the other, is what responses have you gotten since the book has come out? What reactions have surprised you or haven't, or people who've been in touch with you, or?
Yeah, I mean, I've had really a wonderful response so far, from the people who've read the book and people I know and love and people I've never met. So that's very, very gratifying. I'm trying to think if I'm surprised by anything. I mean, I'm hearing from people from like the Dalton School where I was for most of my childhood. I was there from kindergarten up until high school. So I've got reconnected with some of those friends, and the book is really resonating for them. And then some friends from Buxton as well, who were sort of, back in 2011, there was a Spotlight article done. And Spotlight, the Boston Globe Spotlight team did a special investigation into sexual abuse in private schools. And a form went around that my sister sent to me, saying, do you have any experience with this, with sexual predation as a student? And I filled out the form and sent it in, and they were all over me because I had sort of the quintessential story about this. And so when that article came out, I got a lot of email, and I heard back from students who are at the school now who are currently suffering from different forms of abuse, not just teacher abuse, but student abuse and so forth. And, the school has not done a good job of dealing with any of this. I mean, in fact, a markedly bad job. So it's pretty unresolved. Did that answer your question, Hillary? There's something else you were asking though, but I feel like I didn't address it. Anyway, what is
Vicky,
this?
you're up. Vicky, then Lisa.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't really have a question. I just want to say thank you for reading that and for explaining a little bit of where you're coming from. And for me, I write, and I write very, visceral. It might be considered, I don't know, telling too much kind of thing, but it's really inspiring to see how humor can be used and still be as universal as the darkness. I mean, you're going through a dark thing, but you're showing it in a different way, but it's as deep and as connective as tragic writing.
Thank you. I mean, I actually never wrote anything. Well, that's not true. I did try to be funny a couple of times, and my boyfriend, who was my first editor, and he's sort of my better conscience, was like, Erika, come on now, you don't need to rim shot that line, and I love a rim shot, and I love a bad joke, and and it's funny too, because my father saved all my school reports from Buxton, and one of my teachers, my English teachers, was saying just that, like, Erika's a really good reader and a good writer, but she falls prey to her desire to crack wise in her papers, so that's something that I fight fought in this book. And yet one of the more surprising pieces of feedback, because as I was writing this book, I was like, this is so sad. Like, how is anybody going to get through it? And overall, the feedback has been how funny the book is. And I did not try to be funny, you know. It's just that it's so observational and specific that it makes people laugh, you know. And I know when to not take things too seriously, you know, or myself too seriously. I really tried to find that balance, you know, and to keep the lens open to the larger picture, you know, so that readers could include themselves in the picture, you know, that it was an open enough frame to include that other people's experiences. So.
Okay, Lisa Engler, you're up. You look like you're in a car or you're being strapped to a chair. We're not sure.
I'm going to leave that to your imagination. No,
Wow.
we're traveling. My question was, Erika, did you partake in counseling or was writing therapeutic in and of itself?
Oh, thank you for that question. It's a good one. I did all of it is the answer. I actually went into analysis for 6 years, where I was going 3 times a week. I mean, I had so much to unpack. And so I did that. I went into Al-Anon because I was with a drug addict for a long time. James was abusing drugs with me. So I found myself in those rooms, which was enormously helpful. I drank ayahuasca and tried to find God, and actually found him in the shape of love and forgiveness for myself. And I saw James and both my parents as children on my trip, and it was very healing. And then, but really overall, yeah, writing the book, you know, there's a scene in this book where I'm with the teacher, where I'm taking his picture for this, you know, I'm photographing him, and it's the night where we sort of fell in love. And he's explaining how John Cage wrote a piece of music by throwing the I Ching. And it was like this random thing. And he's explaining sort of a random universe that, you know, Cage was expressing in this music. And I say in the book, I found it really uncomfortable. Like, I want to see the pattern. And I still do, you know. I mean, I think this is how human beings make sense of their experiences, by A, recognizing patterns, and then B, framing it into narrative. And I always knew I was going to write this book. I didn't know what the book was going to be, but even as a kid, I was living with a sort of camera on it, looking at me. It was a way of not having to experience myself too directly. And I saved a lot of these stories that I tell in the back of my mind, even when I was 17, you know, that someday I would write a book, because that's what my people do. And then, so this is the book, but it turned out that, like, writing the book, and the book ended up being kind of meta, because a lot of the drama in the book is the drama of trying to write the book. How was I going to do it? You know, the long shadow of these great prolific men hung over me, my father and James, and trying to come out from under that and claim my own experience and my own voice. And I thread some of that drama into the book. And my hope being that my reader at the end of the book would, like, read the last page and look at the book and go, oh, this is the happy ending. I'm holding it in my hand. Like, she told the story. And when I realized that that's what I was doing, I became very excited, you know, and really tried to bring it in that direction.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in, and then Lisa, then Kate, then Janet, and Lisa again. And one question is this, and you brought something up very interesting in the in your last answer. That's what our people do. They write. when your dad had your dad was everywhere in film for 50 years, and it's got to be different. It's the old banyan story analogy where nothing grows under a banyan tree, and you have to find your own way to establish your own voice, not only as a writer, but as a person. It's kind of the Frank Sinatra Jr. syndrome, where there you are as somebody's daughter, or somebody's son, as opposed to somebody on your own 2 feet. Was the book, this book ends, perhaps the last book, a route of achieving it? And how were you able to kind of walk that very fine line?
Well, I was writing this book. I don't think how to answer this.
It's a tough question.
Yeah, it is. Could you just focus it a little more for me? I'm a little
Sure.
lost in it.
I'm just as you in your journey as a writer, how are you able to establish your own voice as opposed to that being of the daughter of somebody else?
Okay, good question.
That may be a better,
First of all,
more concise answer.
Yeah, that's a good one. So I grew up being interesting to people because of who my father was.
Right.
And that's a very odd situation to be in. I'm grateful for who my father was. I loved him dearly, but that was the thing that was interesting about me. And there's actually a moment in the book too where I'm with Elroy at the New York Public Library, and I'm talking to Frank Rich's son, and I'm like all dolled up with him, and I'm thinking, oh my God, the only thing that is interesting about me right now is that I'm here with this man, and that's why people are talking to me. And it's such a deep-rooted feeling for me, going back to the very dawn of my consciousness. I think getting thrown out of the nest was helpful in terms of developing my voice. I learned a lot at boarding school, and one of the things I learned was conversation and banter. I mean, I come from a family of writers, and everybody talks a lot and writes long letters to each other in my family. But I learned to be in the moment and to reflect what I was seeing and talk about it. And then I got into theater, and then I discovered writing academically in school. And then I just kept writing, but I never wanted to be a writer. I was going to be an actress. I pursued that for a good 10 years in my early adulthood. And it was being an actress that led me into writing monologue, which then led me into writing a full-length radio play for LA Theater Works a long time ago. And then I had children, and I was stuck at home, and putting on shows was almost untenable at that point. So I just fully went onto the page, and my sister, who I was hoping was going to be here today, who's an amazing writer in her own right, it's the curse of the family. She's fantastic. Now I'm forgetting my point. What was I going to say about my sister? Anyway, the whole family, it's what we do. It's the family curse. We try to ignore it, and then it finds us in the end. And I'm third generation. My grandfather was a writer in LA. He was a television writer, an early radio writer. He wrote The Great Gildersleeves, for anybody who can remember that. He wrote The Dick Van Dyke Show, Donna Reed, Andy Griffith, World of Disney, all this stuff. And then all my cousins are writers, including my cousin Joss Whedon, who you will know from Buffy the Vampire Slayer and all that. So it's like this soup that we live in here. I can't explain it any other way.
Wow. Let's go on to the next one. Lisa Coton, you're up. Did I say it Coton or Cotton?
You got it right the first time. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank
you.
Coton. Hi, Lisa.
Hi. I was wondering if you had been, if James Elroy had attempted to contact you when the book came out, or when he knew it was coming out, or did you have trepidation about that? Just curious.
No. I have had no contact with him since that last time, the last phone call we had, which was described in the book. And I never really thought that I would. I've been contacted by his authorized biographer. There's a book coming out this year, later this year, from Bloomsbury, and I gave him, his autobiographer, a long interview. But no, I've had no contact with him, and I never really thought I would, and I never thought that he would be upset by the book. Well, that's not never, but mostly I don't think he would have been, because of a couple of things. One, he really respects the truth. I mean, he is just an enthrall to it. He believes in it. It's a mandate. And everything that I've written is the truth. And I know that he would not, I mean, I'm sure if he read the book, I don't know if he would or would not. I'm sure there are going to be things that'll make him cringe, but I built in a piece of insurance, which was that I wrote in the book that he's a fantastic lay. And I think that basically he's gonna not come after me because of that. No, I'm just kidding. He's not gonna do that. He's a non-litigious person as well. And he's an honorable person. And he loves me, you know. I mean, I think in the end, we wish each other well, you know. Yeah.
Well, that is a great answer. And on behalf of guys everywhere, that would certainly shut me up. Kate, you're up next.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, in the car, as if I'm yelling or anyway, this is really great. And Erika, congratulations on the success of the book. I'm listening to the Audible version, and it's fabulous. I love that it's in your voice, in both of those ways. I made a couple stabs at writing my stories, and my where I slammed on the brakes, it seemed like, and I still haven't gotten over that or past it, was I got sick of myself, thinking about myself, writing about myself, and I became, and you've sort of answered this a little bit, I became unclear about how to write about known people. And it was sort of like I kept wondering, I kept feeling like I had to check my motives. Like, do I have to fit this person into a pattern? Is it, what exactly does this person have to do with the narrative, and why am I curious about it? So part of what I'm asking is, did you have a lot of clarity about doing that before writing the book, or did you feel like you had to write your way to the clarity?
Oh, I wrote my way to it. I mean, first of all, it took me 12 years to write this book. You cannot imagine how many drafts are on my computer. And it was the writing that gave me clarity. I did not have clarity when I started in on this by any stretch. But there would be moments, and again, you know, this is the beauty of writing about your life, where you suddenly make connections and have insight into things and can exercise some of your demons around it. So yeah, it was super useful. And as in terms of writing about other people or celebrities or whatever, you know, I did have some legal trouble concerning my ex-husband. That was actually the place that I needed to be most wary of. And he forced me to remove something from the book, which is actually in your version, Bob. I engaged the services of a dear friend who is a libel attorney. And, you know, we sort of vetted the book, and Hachette and I vetted the book so that legally it would stand up. I mean, because everything's true and I have proof of everything, you know, in terms of like artifacts and journal entries and so forth. So, but yeah, I think that the larger question you're asking about, like, why are you writing about this person? Why are you bringing them into the story? And that goes to to craft and understanding like and the world building you're doing. Like, does that character have a place in your world, in the world of this story? And if they don't, you gotta let them go. Like, I had a very good friend, colorful, amazing friend in high school that I tried to wedge into the book because I wanted, she died very young and I wanted to honor her and put her in my story, but she didn't have an action that was related to the plot, and I ended up having to cut her, and it was sad to do, but.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Thanks a
Mhm.
lot.
Okay,
Good-
next
good
is-
luck.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Kate.
Next is Janet. You're up, Janet.
Janet.
You're on mute, dear. There
I
you go.
had a question about memory. I mean, I just marveled at how did you have to uncover memories of how things went down and specifics? Did you use kind of the novelist palette to be able to fill in between the things that, I mean, I'm writing about the past and I have kind of a past present situation. And my difficulty is it's so hard to remember those childhood memories, especially if they were bad and repetitive.
Well, I mean, I think there is a lot of fictionalization, not fictionalization, but fictional tools. I mean, I have never written fiction in my life, and I don't know anything about that, the novelist's tools or anything like that. But memory, I had a lot of assistance because I kept many things in the silver trunk that I describe in the book a few times. I chucked all my diaries, I chucked my date books. And I had to research, and I had to like, did that really happen that way? And was it that close? Like, one of the things I uncovered, in one of my date books was the fact that the affair with the teacher was literally 1 week long. Like, it wasn't a long ongoing thing. And we had had sex one time. And it was such an enormous event. And when I went back to the paperwork, I was like, oh my God, that was but a week. And in terms of like filling in, obviously I have the big events. Some of them are super indelible in my mind and come with a host of sensations and memories and feelings that I've retained. And most of the things that are in the book are big, memorable things for me, But like when you're in a scene, I like, for instance, I'm on the bike ride with Randy, when he's I'm sorry, his name is Henry in the book, when he's going to declare his love to me, and where it's a spring day. And, and I know what day it was. I remember the road very vividly, and then I went and, I remember there being birds, right? And there was the river and the birds. So, you Google, what are the birds of Western Massachusetts? Oh, it's a grackle, thank God, because I'd love to have some grackles in my memoir. So I don't know if I actually saw noted grackles, but I'm putting, as you know, being a brilliant and vivid novelist yourself, Janet, you bring in these details so that your reader can like ground themselves physically in the scene and experience what you experienced.
But it seemed like you kept wonderful, like you had a sense of yourself as the kind of the star of the movie of your life, so that you kept so much information.
Yes. And because I had the camera in the sky for most of my adolescence into my young adulthood, I've put the camera away finally, but I lived to direct my movie because, as I said earlier, it was a way to compartmentalize. And that camera picked up a lot of stuff, and the places that I describe and the people I describe are very real and alive to me. So, and Buxton, which I describe a lot in the book, is a very deep, dear locale for me. So that was easy to bring all of that back.
Did you have to do some research though to sort out these memories?
Yeah. And I talked to some people when that Boston Globe piece came out, you know, one of the things that was really surprising and moved me in this journey was, you know, I heard from other students who had known me then. And one of the things I had learned was that they were sort of traumatized by my disappearance. That there I had been like this member, it was a tiny, there were 80 students at this school, just to give you a sense of how small it was. And so the loss of a senior, you know, who was heading up committees and starring in the play and everything else was really, it really shook these other kids, you know, and it was so swept under the rug and nobody was allowed to really talk about me after I was gone. And they tried to have me excised from the yearbook, and my classmates fought for me to be included in the yearbook. I mean, so yeah, to address what you're asking, that mind, that sort of adult mind that is present in the book, that is guiding the reader through. Like, I have lived through this, I have thought deeply about it, I understand it now. So it's that adult mind that makes, I think, allows my character to make all of these mistakes, and the reader feels, again, grounded because the adult I is present and making sense of what's happening. Does that make sense?
I'll jump in before Diana and Kate had to leave. Here's my question. You had mentioned earlier that Buxton still continues to fumble the ball when it comes to culpability or responsibility for those events in the past. Ben Bradley Jr., who ran the Spotlight team, joined us. He joins us on a number of occasions, either at the front of the table or around the table. And how did the school respond to the Spotlight investigation? And how have they tried, or if they maybe they haven't tried, to kind of make things right with those who were impacted?
So, first of all, when the Spotlight article came out, the school had no response at all. It was very strange. I mean, I thought surely somebody would reach out to me. Nothing. And then a few years ago in 2018, I was on an email. Somebody sent out a group email to a bunch of classmates from my class, you know, encouraging us to come to New York for the little winter reunion that they do there in every February. And I was in a sort of surly mood, and I just replied all like, why the fuck would I fly to New York to support the school that kicked me out after I had been abused by one of their faculty members, you know? I mean, I just was like, we're done here. And it blew up into this long conversation, this chain. And this group of alumni, and that's how I learned how upset my classmates had been, and people had always wondered what had happened to me, and you know, and whether it had affected me, and as much as, you know, all this stuff. And a big letter was written to the board of trustees at the school saying, you know, Erika is coming forward representing scores of students who were abused at this school, and we support her, and we are calling for a reckoning. And immediately the current headmistress wrote back to the group saying like, oh, you know, we take this very seriously, but, you know, and we're aware that there have been romantic relationships at the school, which was horrific, that she characterized what happened to me as a romantic relationship. And, you know, we just hope that you can remember all the good things about Buxton, you know, the snacks and the hiking trips and you know, and everybody was just like, oh, Jesus, this is so bad. Meanwhile, all these other schools are having to reckon with their own history of sexual abuse. And these schools are like coming forward and taking full accountability and setting up funds to like help the victims of abuse with psychiatry and, you know, all of that. There's apparently like some kind of a service where a school can have a fund that will pay for victims' psychiatric care, whatever. And so that got sent out to all the alumni in an email. And there's nothing on their website about it. That was all that was ever said. For me, I mean, I've already done my therapy for many, many, many years. I don't think they're going to reimburse me for my therapy. And they never said anything to me personally. There was never an apology because it was such a legal thing. They never admitted guilt. It was one of those, I'm sorry you feel you were hurt kind of apologies.
It was a non-apology apology. Mistakes were made.
Yeah, and it covered their asses because they're not willing to. So part of what helped me stay sane through that was like, I'm writing this book. And I didn't write it for revenge, but I wrote it because I really needed to have the truth told about what happened. Because I've been living under this sort of false identity as a sort of a bad girl, a troublemaker, you know, a marriage wrecker, whatever it was, jailbait. I used to be jailbait. You know, there's all of these sort of cliched monikers that get attached to women in a patriarchal culture. And I was being shoved into that. And with Elroy, I was being turned into the femme fatale, which is just another fucking stupid trope and uninteresting and makes no room for women's actual personalities or experiences. So a lot of this book for me was about like, not just coming out from under the shadow of great prolific men, but also like, what happened to that girl? She is not a cliche. She is an actual living, breathing human being with an experience. And here it is. If you wondered what happened to the girl who slept with the teacher, and if that had any effect on her life, well, here you go. In fact, it does. And I'm not, of course, the only one who has been affected by this. But I'm glad to have been able to write this book and maybe, you know, give a voice to other people who have had this kind of experience.
This is a great answer. There's a follow-up to it. I want to expand it to include Janet and Melanie a bit, because the book has an interior life as it's created, as you go through the cathartic notion of translating pain or trauma into pages, which can have a cathartic effect. And then a book has an external life, an exterior life of how it's either may become a movie, as in the case of White Oleander for Janet, you know, where we're seeing Melanie's conversations surrounding the book. We're seeing a lot of interesting things, and you've gotten some really wonderful notices from Airmail, which I really enjoy. I really think Carrie Beecham has turned me on to that. And at the same time, the Vanity Fair piece, and there is kind of a bubble about the book as it's moving upwards. I mean, as books become movies, does it change the original notion of what the book was to start off with? And I'll open it up.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just start by saying so far, no offers. So, you know, the bubble of the book, I mean, I think that it's all very early days on this book. And it's very hard for books to, I think, pierce the field of noise that's out there around books and culture and things coming out all the time. It's harder than ever. But I did have an experience with my first book where it got optioned by Mitch Hurwitz, the guy who did Arrested Development. And we had a fantastic showrunner. We were meeting with all the studios. I got a $10,000 check. And it was awesome. And then the writer's strike hit in 2008 and the whole thing went down the toilet. So I don't even go there, you know. I mean, we should all be Janet Fitch, you know, but you know, with a brilliant movie made out of a brilliant book. But you know, time will tell.
Janet, do you want to, Janet and Melanie, do you want to add to that? Because I think it's interesting watching how, I mean, when I've talked to authors whose books have been made and who've either gone the TV movie route, the theatrical route, or some other route, they said they regarded it as giving away their daughter at a wedding altar, because they don't know what's going to happen to their daughter once she gets married. And is that a fair comment? Have I lost my mind, or is there a nugget of truth there?
Well, my experience is just that it's like somebody, like you're an artist, say you're Millet, and Van Gogh comes and paints a painting after Millet, after, based on your art. Millet doesn't go, oh, well, that's not actually what I would have done, because they already did it. So I just feel, that it's a different animal. But yeah, you just have to let it go and let that artist create their own work based on your work. Your work doesn't disappear. And if it's good, it will bring people to your work. And if it's bad, people will say, oh, the book was better. So Melanie, I don't think that
you're on mute too, Melanie. You're on mute. There you go.
Hey, Erika, I'm looking forward to reading your book. I'm older, and I was part of I call it the We Too movement, where we just stuffed it and we didn't really talk about this stuff back then. But in my book, I have a lot of anecdotes about Henny Youngman copping a feel on live television, or Ed Asner grabbing my butt during a photo op at a big charity event, and having to kind of stuff this and not bring it up. And I turn my pain into comic metaphor. The interesting thing for my book, I'm certainly not getting the offers that you and Janet are getting. Unfortunately, my book is anecdotal. It doesn't really have a long through line except my personal evolution to accept myself and stop objectifying myself for profit. And I have been invited to some wonderful conversations, though, like Bob's here, that I've been participating in. And I've been on seminars at Yale University about the Jewish diaspora, heady conversations that I hadn't been invited to before. I've been on a lot of fascinating podcasts with female therapists and female talk show hosts. And I'm just invited to a lot more virtual parties than I ever have been before. My book is starting to get into bookstores without my pushing. And it's getting into libraries and doing library talks, which at my level, at the moment of notoriety, has been a great deal of fun and keeps me company while I'm writing my next masterpiece. So, but Erika, I just think your book just sits where I live, as an ex-New Yorker who was in the theater literati, kind of a fringe person, because I was an actor rather than a writer. This is right in my niche. And so I'm really looking forward to getting the book from Bob with your autograph on it and knowing more about you. I just didn't know about you until he brought you to my attention. So I'm very gratified to be here today supporting you.
Well, I'm so glad you are. It's lovely to meet you. Yeah.
Janet, you raised your hand.
And I look forward to reading your book.
Thank you.
I did want to say one thing about this book, because I tore through it. Oh my God, do not start it at 10 p.m. That's all I have to say, because there will be no sleep for you that night. Is that it's made me rethink so many things that I have had opinions about over the years. It's made me think about so many women and their stories, women who've gotten involved with cultural figures. And although they were, women with tremendous creativity themselves, and really a lot of talent, but as soon as they're with something like a force of nature like Sam Spade, suddenly, they just become in the shadow of. I know the piece, the part of the book actually talks about Joyce Maynard, who is a figure that I had certain opinions about until I read Erika's book. And then it's like, oh, wow, I'm never going to think about people like that the same way I thought about White Oleander, where there are serial relationships with older men of this kid whose mother is in foster care, and the mother exposing her to things that she was in no way ready to, to see. And because I had seen it so closely from the adolescent's point of view, in which it is a relationship, it is a love affair. And then looking at work that's now 20 years old and thinking, man, she could not pull back that far to see what was, but she sensed the return to older men. And when she has this relationship with a young kid, her own age, she is fighting that desire. She's aware that she has this Achilles heel. And I couldn't stop thinking about that whole syndrome. And, you brought it so into consciousness that it's not going to escape.
Yeah, I mean, definitely in my experience, it's pretty classic and straightforward. I was an abandoned child looking for love, and I found it in sex, that was the closest I could get. And I kept being surprised and heartbroken that none of the people I was sleeping with actually loved me or wanted to keep me around. And it took a really, really, really long time. It took this psychic break that I had, not like I didn't lose my mind, but I came close. I mean, my grief over my childhood lasted a very long time and really had to run its course before I could start writing about it in the way that I have. But a big part of it, and goes to your Maynard point, one of the things I had to learn in this was to have compassion for myself as a girl. I mean, that was the big piece. I needed to go back and I needed to parent her and love her as nobody had, really. And it was by doing that, and the reason I used the title, The Big Hurt, I mean, what I'm talking about is this trauma. And I think that people have that, and that when you see, and this is one of the reasons why I can never hate James Ellroy, and that I will always love him. I will always have love for him in my heart, even though what he did in the relationship was inexcusable and it was awful. But, we brought each other to a place we needed to get to, and we did it in a rough manner. But underneath, I understand that what is wrong with him is the hurt. It's not that he's a bad person, it's that he is a damaged person. And I could see so clearly the good boy in him. I mean, I still can to this day. I still believe in that kid. And it's just a matter of compassion. It's just like, we're just fucking humans trying to figure it out. We're screwing it up. We're broken in places that people can't see, and that often we can't see ourselves. And I think if there's any real obligation that we have on our little journeys through this realm, is that we have to connect with self-love and forgiveness for people. And I mean, it's kind of mushy, but that's the universal truth, And so, Joyce Maynard, while she will never be my friend, I don't think, I've never heard from her, I've never talked to her, whatever, but I could see the broken place in her. That story meant something to me. And, we have some of the same broken parts.
That was such a good answer. What really impressed me about it is that the easy trope in a book like this is to create a villain. That's the easy thing. It's to create the mommy dearest type villain that you just kind of run your way. You kind of run over the dead body to get on a bestseller list. And and you chose the more complex path. Diana's been so patient. You're up and you're on mute. You're on mute there. There you go.
Hi, I'm Diana Danielle, and along with Hillary, I was in a UCLA class with Erika as our teacher back in about 2015.
So long ago.
So long ago, but yet I remember.
My God.
That. And you were probably either with James or writing this, coming to all your wisdoms and realization, you know, and I've had my own path since that time. But I feel like you brought the Me Too movement to Buxton. You said that you were really representing all the people that were abused. It made me think of the book by Chanel Miller, where it's like, know my name. Like the man, the student athlete from Stanford never said he was sorry, just like you never got that apology. I haven't read the book yet, in full disclosure. I would have been attracted to it if I hadn't loved you as a teacher, because I have my own set of hurts and traumas, and I welcome you finding your voice so that I can find mine. And I just wanted, one of my questions was, do you consider yourself a feminist?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Because if people were reviewing this book, would they see you as kind of like now a leader in helping that whole, it was We Too. I mean, I had my breast fondled by Alex Trebek during a commercial break when he was on a game show, and my mother loves him, and she was more, and it was very sad. He died of pancreatic cancer, which her father died of, my grandpa. And so, but I was like, you do remember what happened. Of course, I told her, she never remembered. So I told her again, and it was such a time in life, it was like the late 80s, but it was still like when the camera came on and he wasn't touching my breast, did it really happen? Like I've even like doubted myself.
That's so common.
I haven't even told very many people. It's so silly. It's not like a big exciting story and sad story and traumatic story like yours, but there's other things too. And I'm just so glad that you wrote it. And I hope the bubble comes up and pops, and that there's a movie too, and that it's done well.
You know, it's funny. It's really nice to see you, first of all, and thanks for coming. And you look great. And I have 2 students in this Zoom. It's really nice. You know what, that unsure whether that actually happened thing, you know, that's trauma. I mean, maybe it's small t trauma, not capital T trauma, but that's what it is. Our minds scramble the facts. It's so confusing and so disjointed. I'm right in the middle of that amazing Bessel van der Kolk book, The Body Keeps the Score. I think everybody's reading it right now. And I just listened to his interview with Ezra Klein this morning. So I'm fascinated by all of that. God, I wish I had read that book before I had written mine, because there's just enormous insight, and it really makes me see things and frame things in a way, even a fresher way, a more insightful way than I had. But yeah, that, like, did that really happen? Should we talk about it? I'm a little embarrassed about it. Was I wearing the wrong shirt that day? Did I give him the impression that I was
I a bad girl now?
Yeah, was I? Yeah. Well, because once upon a time I did X, Y, and Z. So, I mean, it just gets so balled up. And of course, he's the bad guy in the story, but it's just so classic, and that's why I say, when I want to write it, I don't know if I'm advancing the Me Too or the feminist conversation in general, but it is my hope to advance, or at least deepen, the conversation around this corner of Me Too. Like, what happens to these children, and teenagers. I mean, I have, thank God, no experience with childhood sexual assault in terms of like incest and early childhood, and none of that. Thank God, thank God. My growing up home was free of alcohol and sexual deviance. It just, what I'm learning from this trauma book is, like, it can happen in little ways. It's not necessarily, grandpa touched me. It's often, a moment of just terrible cognitive dissonance where you're placed in a situation that is threatening and unfamiliar. And that's confused those feelings. And I think that's what happened to me.
Okay, and I have to ask just like a little like terribly like gossipy thing. Is this teacher from Buxton, is he still, I know you changed his name because you mentioned that, but is he still alive, and has he contacted you? Has he passed away?
Never have I heard from him in all these years. The Spotlight team dug him up and spoke to his wife. He did not want to speak to them. They did not want to give an interview. Apparently, he taught at Bennington for many years, and I think he's retired now, and I think he lives somewhere in New Hampshire or something, and that's all I know. But he has no I've Googled him over the years, you know, just like when the internet finally came online, I'm like, oh, this is my chance to find out what happened to this guy. No footprint left, so I don't know. And it doesn't matter, he was a schmuck, and I never knew him. It didn't matter. It was a predatory relationship based on projection. So it didn't matter who he was.
You know, here's a question that almost open up to everybody. You talk about how the private misbehavior of famous people are somehow covered up by the public narrative that they bring to the table. Ed Asner being an avuncular grandpa type, Alex Trebek almost approaching Tom Hanks, you know, everymanish. I mean, what the fuck is this? Is this specific to the 310 area code? I mean, my God. I mean,
I think it's power, Bob. I think it's power. I think that men get in positions of power and they feel entitled to it all. And the first stop in the entitlement train is generally women's bodies.
Yeah.
No, not sex. Women's bodies.
Right. Okay.
It's different.
Yep.
Because, you know, whatever, you know, a boob grope does not necessarily mean sex. It means I've just checkmated you with my hand. You know, I mean, there's so much mixed into it that is not even about sex.
Yeah.
You know, just like, you know, any kind of rape. Rape is not really about sex. It's about power and control.
So let's see, we've got a few minutes here. I see that Lisa Englert had a comment or a question.
No, I was.
She's either in a field of flowers or on Highway 17.
I didn't. I was just commenting. I don't even know what my comment was about the discussion. And that it is. It's a patriarchal society based on power.
I mean, it's just. I feel like, and I mean, yeah, this is speculation on my part, but I really feel with the Me Too movement, with Black Lives Matter, with all of these sort of social movements that we see, I really feel the needle moving on this. I just saw this morning that now in New York, now that Cuomo's gone, and I'm forgetting the new governor's name, the woman,
Kathy Hochul.
Hochul, right.
Yeah.
Like something mentioned, like now there are, you know, like X number of female governors in this country. There's a record number. I mean, it's still not nearly enough, but like I feel things sort of shifting, the conversation shifting. I'm encouraged by it.
And the last, Janet, did you have a question? I noticed you had put your name down here. I don't know if we had.
Yeah, that was I already went on that.
So we got about 3 minutes left here. You know, before we take off, any words of wisdom, Erika? Besides by
I don't know, Barbara. Are you still here, Barbara? Are you on the screen? Oh, hey, checking on you.
We've had about 25 people.
She's muted
today, kind of come in and come out.
Yeah. Okay. I think she's trying to talk.
She's trying to. There she is. She's on now.
Still muted.
My comments had more to do with that fabulous writing of yours, and then we kind of got into all the other topics, and I didn't really bring it back. But the opening of the book even I know all the players, I know everybody. I had to figure out all the names of the people, all the fake names. But anyway, but the writing is incredible from that first chapter, where you just swept us up in your hand and just sat us down and made us keep reading. And that's not easy. So I wanted to congratulate you on that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So
yeah, I mean, that's 12 years of going over your manuscript.
Yeah.
I learned a lot. I learned a lot from Elroy about building drama and, A to B in every scene, keep progressing your story. Every scene in the book has to move the story either on a physical level or an emotional level. And I just kept to that. I just made sure that there was nothing, not a single chapter that wouldn't either deepen my reader's understanding of the situation and the stakes or move the story forward. Yeah.
You did a good job of that, Erika.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming today. This was great. I mean, so many times we've had folks and it's and every third word in the conversation was me, and me. But this was really a fantastic conversation, and it was made better, as they always are, with the people around the table. So thank you. So here's what's coming up next. Marvin Kalb will be in a couple weeks, followed that by Haley Mills. And we'll have Haley Mills, and then after that we'll have Laura Galloway, who sent me an email, sends her regrets. And then we're going to have our friend John Callis doing the annual space roundup in terms of what's going on Mars. So thank you very much. And Erika, again, a great conversation. Match is a great book.
Thank you so much, Bob. And everybody who came, those I know, those are new to me. Just lovely to see and meet you all, and fantastic questions. I mean, there's no greater pleasure for an author than talking about their book. So thanks for letting me do that for all this time today. And thank you, Bob, for this program.
I'll reach out to you in a few seconds. Thank you so much, everybody. Great. Have a great day.
Bye.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Bye. Thank you.